Good. Monica, your turn.
Hi, everyone. Tonight we're going to have a speaker called Melissa Timberman. And Melissa and I have known each other for a couple of years. We're both in Denver, Colorado. We're in a business group together. And I'm actually a client of Melissa, so I can testify that she does a good job with helping you with your finances. But here's what you need to know about her. Melissa is the creator of the Smart Money Bootcamp, an online financial literacy training series designed to master your finances. She's the hostess of the monthly Wine, Women, and Wealth education evening here in Denver, Colorado. She makes finance simple and fun and takes away your anxiety about the topic. Please welcome Melissa Timberman.
Thank you very much, Melissa.
Thank you for having me. I'm pretty excited to be here. I really love working with women in particular. That's why I do those Wine, Women, and Wealth events. And I really love talking about education, just getting people to know more. So tonight we are going to talk about retirement and wealth accumulation. Like, a lot of people wonder, what are my options? I don't even really know. So that's going to be our topic for tonight. And I'm doing this with the focus on thinking about what it's like to be a small business owner. I understand a lot of you are small business owners, so that's really what I'm going to focus on. And the first concept I want to talk about is the retirement model of what we call the three-legged stool. So if you want to pull up that handout I've put in the chat, that's going to give you a really nice visual of what that looks like. And the idea is that a happy, healthy retirement looks like a three-legged stool. Your retirement is how you want to live. And one thing we're going to talk about tonight is retirement doesn't mean I'm going to not be working at a certain point. A lot of us, maybe we like our jobs. We don't want to be bored, right? So retirement is not about not working. Retirement is about planning for the future to give yourself options. So keep that in mind as we keep talking tonight. Retirement is about giving you options. So a happy, healthy retirement or financial future is supported by three major things: long-term care, having a long-term care plan, your actual savings vehicles, the money we set aside regularly in hopes that it's going to grow and support us in our future, and using our real estate. So there's a couple of different ways we can talk about that. And one thing I want to say is feel free to interrupt at any time. Either use the reactions to raise your hand. If you guys know how to use that, at the bottom of your Zoom, use your reactions to raise your hand, put something in the chat, or just speak up. All of those things are fine. Keep in mind, tonight is going to be a really broad overview of that model, okay? I have 30 minutes to talk about a really broad topic. So this talk tonight is designed to spark ideas and give you a direction to go in the future. So for every point I'm going to talk about tonight, I'm going to tell you, if you want more information, this is where you go. Okay, so let's talk about that first leg of our three-legged stool. And that idea is long-term care planning. It's not something a lot of people are going to talk about, because I'm going to tell you, it is the least fun part of your financial plan to talk about, right? Every financial plan is going to fail when the unexpected happens, unless we plan for it. And the biggest major thing that can happen to us is our healthcare. Modern healthcare in America is really good at saving our lives. But if any of you have experienced this, it is not good at being affordable. I don't know if any of you have ever run into a really major long-term illness like heart attack, stroke, cancer, Alzheimer's or dementia, those kinds of chronic illnesses. If either you've run into it, you've had a partner or a family member run into that. But it really wreaks havoc on your lifestyle, but also your finances. Luckily, we can actually plan on how to take care of ourselves. So we know statistically, 9 out of 10 of us. So how many people are in the Zoom room here? There's 11 people in the Zoom room. Monica and Monica, raise your hand. These two ladies are safe, statistically. These two ladies are not going to run into any kind of long-term healthcare problem. The rest of us are in trouble. So statistically, you can just see how often it's going to happen. So I can say confidently, although not with a great deal of pleasure, I can say that confidently either me or my husband is going to have to deal with some kind of long-term illness. So how do we take care of that? What are the things we can do to plan for it? One of those things is called living benefits. And so living benefits is a type of a life insurance policy. So does everyone know what life insurance does? It pays your family when you die, right? And that is not exciting. I can tell you that right now. But what's really interesting is a lot of modern life insurance policies allow you to access that life insurance money while you are still alive if you suffer a major medical illness like heart attack, stroke, cancer, chronic illness, a lot of these types of things. So that can be a way to create that long-term care plan so that your family's finances don't suffer while you're trying to recover from a major illness. Again, the point of where do I go from here? Where do I get that? Living benefits is something that I supply. You can also go online and search for living benefits provider and do any amount of research you can online to find someone to talk to about putting that kind of plan in place for you and your family. The next part of long-term care planning is a program called Medicare. Does everyone know what Medicare is? Medicare is the United States federal safety net for older people to help them pay for their medical expenses. It's a type of insurance, actually. It's available to anyone over the age of 65, and it will pay a certain portion of your health care expenses. Where do you get that? You can sign up for a Medicare account at age 65 on the government websites, medicare.gov. Another thing you can do to create a good long-term care plan is once you reach that Medicare age of 65, you can get supplemental insurance. Medicare can pay for a lot of your health expenses, but not all of them. So supplemental insurance, if you've heard of it, it's called Medicare Plan B, Part D, things like that. You can talk to, again, for your notes here, where do you get that? You can talk to usually it's a small business owner who specializes in Medicare supplemental insurance. So search online in your area for someone who provides or can help you navigate the Medicare supplemental insurance plans. You can have all three of these things at once, and it's actually a really good idea. Medicare will cover most of your health expenses. Supplemental insurance will cover a lot of the rest, and living benefits will cover your living expenses while you're dealing with your healthcare issue. So those are some of the major things you can do to create a good long-term care plan. The next thing we're going to talk about is the other side of that retirement planning support, which is real estate. So real estate, there is no other way to say it, but owning your own property that you live in is one of the most important things you can do for your financial future and your retirement. The average household wealth of someone who rents is about $6,500. The average household wealth of someone who is a homeowner is 44 times that, almost $300,000. That is a huge difference. Some of you might be renters, some of you might be homeowners. If you are a renter, it's a really good idea to at least look into homeownership because it can have a huge impact on that financial future. Again, having a great financial future means you have more options. And so homeownership is one of the best things you can do for your financial future. Someone's home is usually their biggest asset in life. So how do we make sure that our real estate supports a really healthy financial future? There's actually two ways we can do this. One is if we have a home that we own, there are ways that we can live off the equity in our home. Most of us are going to have a mortgage. Hopefully, once you reach retirement age, you might not have a mortgage anymore. And if you reach that point, you've got some options. One is called a reverse mortgage, and modern reverse mortgages are a fantastic, really safe way to live off the equity of your home. There's also other options like a cash out refi. They all have pros and cons. And so if this is something you might be interested, once you hit the age of 55, what you should do is call a reverse mortgage specialist and talk to them about your financial options, about how to best use that equity in your home. Now, when it comes to real estate, we don't have the option of just owning our home. We can also invest in other property, right? And so if we have the option, if we can invest in other property, then we can use that to live off in retirement too, either by getting rental income from those properties or by selling those properties and then having that money, that equity to live on. So those are two of those legs of that stool we want to live on. But the one that you guys are probably the most interested in right now is what kinds of savings vehicles are available to me, right? If you're a small business owner, you probably don't have access to something like a 401k. That's the main savings vehicle that an employer will offer to you at a job. And if you're a small business owner, it can be kind of not very attractive to try and go through all the paperwork to set one up for yourself, right? So if you're not going to do a 401k, what are your options for saving for your future? Now, your first option is Social Security. Does everyone know what Social Security is? Again, it's like Medicare. It's the government safety net for providing you some retirement income. Now, most people know what Social Security is, but most people don't know this next part. Social Security was never meant to be a standalone retirement plan. Some people think, oh, I have Social Security, I'll just retire and get Social Security. Social Security was only ever meant to replace about 30 or 40% of your income. Now, some people are worried that Social Security is in trouble. By the time women our age are ready to retire, there's not going to be anything left. And I can tell you that that's not true, okay? By the time we retire, there will be Social Security. It's just that it might replace 20 to 30% of your income instead of 30 to 40% of your income. So you still can count on Social Security, and all of us are paying it. It kind of depends on your business structure as a small business owner, but for some business structures, you're going to be paying payroll taxes. I don't know if some of you do that. And if you're not paying payroll taxes, then when you file your taxes at the end of the year, you're paying self-employment taxes. Some of that goes into Social Security, and that is what's going to provide you some of that safety net for when you retire. Okay, so that is something you can count on. It's not going to be a huge part of your retirement. So what other options do we have? Well, our next best option is something called an IRA. This is an individual retirement account. It's really easy to set one up. And usually what you do is you set one up and you put an automatic deduction into from your bank account into that. You put that in every month, and you just slowly and regularly build up money over your career. Now, what happens with small business owners? What does your cash flow look like? Sometimes it's like this, sometimes you have a slow month. So there are other ways that you can set up IRAs that you can still save for your future, even if you can't do that same amount every single month, okay? So even if you can't do that same amount every single month, you can still have an IRA, and it will still save money, and you can still use that money to help you pay your expenses in your retirement, right? You can still get income out of it. So an IRA is a really great option for all small business owners. And where do we get an IRA? I can help you put together an IRA. You can talk to a certified financial planner or almost any financial person that you can look up, get to know, that kind of thing. Almost any financial person can help you set up an IRA. Okay, they're very accessible. The next savings vehicle that I wanted to talk to you about is something called an indexed account. And indexed accounts are really cool. Monica, how much more time do I have?
15 more minutes, or
15 more minutes?
you can go on and
Stop me if you guys need detail on anything, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about indexed accounts briefly right now, and if we have time at the end, I'll go back into more detail. But an indexed account is something you can use for retirement savings, and the really cool thing about indexed accounts is that they actually protect you from loss and you still get to grow. You still get to have some upside potential in them. What are most of us afraid of if we're looking at our retirement accounts right now? The economy is not doing that well. The stock market is not doing that well. And as women,
losing money instead of gaining it, right?
I know that's not the point. These are your hard-earned savings. You're putting those dollars away and you're just seeing them disappear through absolutely no fault of your own, right? That hurts. And something that's really important to women and to small business owners is security and safety. When you're a small business owner, you're actually taking a really big risk. You're working really hard on something that might absolutely be your baby and your passion in life. And so what we want to do is we want to have safety and security in other areas of our life. And that can feel really bad when you don't have safety and security in something like your finances, right? So an index account is an option for how to save your money. Again, I can go into it more detail if we have time at the end, but the basic definition of an index account is it is a way for you to passively participate in the upside of the economy while preventing any losses. So short version on that, where do we get indexed account? This might be a newer concept to people. It's not super common. It's not super common for small business owners to use. And so where do you get them? It's actually my baby. I love that idea of safety and security. So you can get an index account by talking to someone like me. So these are our three legs of our three-legged stool. And I wanted to take a minute really quickly. Okay, thank you, Christina. I wanted to take a moment really quickly to ask if there's anything that anyone needed to clarify or anything that I said that was confusing to anyone.
Well, if I may say, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, it's Eleonora. I have a SEP IRA. Yes, it's a self-employed account. How about that? And then I know there is a Roth IRA, you know, one is pre-tax, one is not. Talk about those, please.
Yes, some of the next thing I wanted to talk to you guys was about tax-free vehicles. Okay, so what you were talking about, Eleonora, there are two different types of IRAs that are accessible to small business owners. They each have their different advantages. One is called a SEP IRA. The other is called a simple IRA. If you can access them depends on your business structure and depends on how you do your taxes. It also depends on how much paperwork you want. A simple IRA is a little simpler than the SEP IRA. So those are other options, but they're less common. So I wasn't planning on talking about them tonight because of limited.
That's interesting because my accountant, that's the first thing they suggested, and I just went into the bank. They didn't even, I never heard of this index card, so it was the SEP IRA that they right away told me to do. And I just went into the bank and they set up one for me.
Yeah, I mean, they're not super difficult, but there's not always as much advantage to them as you think over a regular plain old IRA. The advantages of a SEP and a simple IRA generally revolve around how much you can contribute as a business. But depending on how you do your taxes, you're going to get a deduction for making payroll, making payroll payments to yourself anyway. So again, those are options that were kind of outside the purview of what I wanted to discuss tonight.
So you think that this index, would you please, if you may, just compare the index card you said and the IRA better and why?
Yeah, they generally grow differently. So one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move my camera really quick. I've got a whiteboard here and I can draw the difference between the two. So we're going to do that.
I tried to put the video on.
I do have some other things to talk about, but this again, if it's a new concept, it is going to be interesting. So yes, it's worth talking about right now. So again, an index account, I'm sorry, the light is terrible. Give me one moment. All right, you can see me a teeny tiny bit better. An indexed
Yeah.
account, again, the definition of an index account is something that allows you to participate in the upside of the market while protecting yourself from the downside. And when we look at an IRA, it's generally something where you're invested in the stock market. And as we all know, the stock market grows like this. It goes up and down and up and down, and it goes up over time. But as Monica said, right now we're in this period where we are going down. And we don't really know
Yes.
how far down we're going to go, right? There's a lot of uncertainty there. And so what happens is you lose money over whatever period of time. And luckily, the stock market is always subject to something we call the rebound. We always have our best years after we have our worst years, right? And that's kind of the saving grace of what we do here, or what we do in the stock market. But this is what it can look like. So let's go back to 2000. Most of us here can remember that time period. So from the year 2000 to 2002, we lost 46% in the stock market. It was the biggest crash we've ever had, up to and including the Great Depression in 1930, okay? Now, luckily, 2003 was the single best year we've ever seen in the stock market. We gained 29% that year. Well, we can all do basic math. So what happens when you lose 46% and you gain 29%? You're actually still underwater. So it actually took us, this drawing is not to scale, it actually took us till 2007 to get back to square one when it came to our accounts in the stock market. And if any of you can remember that time period, you're going to remember, oh no, I'm sure I recovered a lot faster than that. And you probably did, because you were probably still contributing to your accounts, right? So you offset your own losses. But honestly, it really took us quite a long time to get back to square one, just break even, right? And then 2007 was a great year. And what happened in 2008?
Recession.
We really took a nosedive, right? We lost 42% in 10 months. I mean, sometimes I get chills just thinking about it, like how devastating that was to people. It was an incredible loss. So we lost money in 2008. And again, the rebound effect, 2009 was fantastic. We gained back another 23%. That's great. But we were still underwater. It took us till 2013 to get back to square one. And then from 2013 to 2020, we actually had about an average few years there. 3 in every 10 years are going to be negative, and 3 years in that period, 1 year was we gained 0%, 2 years we were slightly negative, the other years we were positive. So it was an extremely average period till 2020. And then in 2020, the economists still have not decided what the fallout and the conclusions were going to be, because it was just so very awful. But this is what your SEP IRA, your IRA, and your simple IRA, this is how they're going to grow, okay? Up and down, up over time, and there's some uncertainty there. Now, the way an indexed account grows, there's several different kinds of indexed accounts, and an indexed account really just refers to the way your money's going to grow. So again, we have this guarantee that we're protected against loss, and that we can gain some of the upside. So what does that look like? Let's go back to 2000. Again, 2000, 2001, 2002, all really bad years. So in those years, in your index account, you wouldn't gain anything. 0, 0, 0. And after 3 years, you would look at me and you'd be like, Melissa, you told me this is a good idea. What is wrong with you? And I will tell you, yes, I know you haven't made anything, but you haven't lost anything. And all of your friends are down here having lost half of what they had, and you still have everything. And so in the following year, the economy gets better, and your friends make, 29% on their accounts. And what happens to your money? Well, when there's a floor underneath you, there's a ceiling above you. And so there might be there will be caps on your growth. So that following year, when everyone's doing really, really well, you're going to make money too. And so you're going to make, let's say maybe 10 to 12%. If I went to any of you and said, you made 12% this year, would you be mad at me? No, that's great. You might look at me and say, I only made 10%. My friends made 29%. And I'll say, yes, but they're still underwater and you have made money. So all of the clients I work with, Monica included, they are willing to give up some of that upside in order to always be protected against the downside. So in your indexed account, you're going to make money in a good year right here. And in a bad year, you're never going to lose. In good years, you make money. In bad years, you won't lose. That's how an indexed account compares to the IRAs. Does that make sense?
Can I ask something?
Yes, and I am really mad at my accountant because he never told me about this.
He probably didn't know because he's not a finance person, he's an accountant. Here's
Okay.
a way to think about it, Eleanor. If you can see me,
Yeah, I see you.
the finance world is vast. All right?
Mhm.
The finance world is huge. The finance industry can buy oil and gas 10 times over. It's enormous. And every finance person knows a sliver of it. Your stockbroker knows this sliver. Your accountant knows this sliver. I know this sliver.
Okay.
I'm not the be-all, end-all finance person. I am here to give people options. Your accountant didn't do anything wrong.
Okay.
Yvette, you wanted to ask something.
We learn and we grow and we absorb new things and we think, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I want to take advantage of this. But just because you didn't know 5 years ago, it doesn't mean anyone did anything wrong.
Thank you.
It still might be disappointing. I get that. But no one did anything wrong for you. And a SEP IRA is very traditional advice. There's nothing wrong with it. So if we're done with indexed accounts.
There's
I
another
actually have a
Melissa.
question. I don't know if you saw my
Oh,
hand
yes.
raised.
Anna, yes.
When you say index account, do you mean index fund? Do you use that
No.
as a synonym for index fund?
Great question. An index fund is a type of investment in the stock market. So an index fund will actually track the stock market perfectly, and you can absolutely lose money in an indexed fund. The similarity in the word index just talks about how it grows. So an indexed account is different. It does protect you from loss.
So who issues it? Like, I don't understand how you use this term index account, and I'm pretty savvy financially, and I know a lot about securities and accounts, so I'm just a little confused. Like, is this through a brokerage or how?
It is. Indexed accounts are not securities. It's a completely different type of financial instrument.
Okay, but you get it through a brokerage like Vanguard or Fidelity?
You can. I work with indexed accounts a lot. I love giving the word about them because they are such an amazing addition to your financial portfolio. There's a lot of different types of indexed accounts. There are indexed accounts that are tax-free. There are indexed accounts that can be structured as IRAs. Again, indexed accounts refers to how it grows. It doesn't refer to the legal structure.
Right, I'm just wondering what exactly it is. Like, I am wondering about the legal structure. What exactly?
There's a lot of different types of indexed accounts. You can have an IRA as an indexed account. You can have an annuity as an indexed account. You can have even a life insurance policy as an indexed account. There's several different kinds of indexed accounts.
I was going to ask if a Roth IRA can be an indexed account, but that's a yes, right?
Yeah, Roth IRAs
Yeah.
can be indexed accounts as well.
Is my Roth IRA an indexed account?
Absolutely.
That's what okay.
So then what you mean by index account is what the money is invested in?
How it grows, yes.
Well, how it grows is not a financial term, right? Like, is it like what it's invested in is what you mean by index account?
It's a different structure altogether. So when you invest in the stock market, you choose maybe a particular stock like Apple or Amazon or Microsoft, or you can choose an index fund, or you can choose a mutual fund or an ETF exchange traded fund. Indexed accounts use something called strategies. And unfortunately, we are going to run out of time. Would love to set up a meeting with you if you're interested, but I wanted to get back to some of the other things on our sheet.
Okay,
So,
I just feel like you're not actually telling us
I'm sorry,
what
Monica.
it is.
Monica, you know how this works. Is there anything you would add that might help clarify?
Yeah, let me say this in Hungarian. Igen, szerintem a kérdésedre az a válasz, hogy igen. Tehát, hogy milyen fajta fundba van befektetve.
Hogy mibe fektet bele?
Mibe,
De
igen,
akkor
mert
miért nem
az,
mondja azt?
de mondta, hogy essentially yes, igen. Tehát az a neve a fundnak, hogy ilyen meg olyan indexed fund. És egy
De most
ilyen...
azt mondta, hogy nem index fund. Pont azt mondta. De.
Okay. Beszélj vele külön, de az enyémre oda van írva a Roth IRA-ba, hogy ilyen meg olyan indexed fund, és egy kupac részvény van benne, amin én nem
Jó,
is
azt
tudom,
tudom,
hogy
mi az, hogy index fund, de azt mondta,
Igen,
hogy ez
igen.
nem az. De oké, köszönöm.
De, hogy miben van befektetve, igen. Okay, I think we're good.
The last thing I wanted to talk about savings vehicles was something Eleonora had asked about, and that is the power of saving in tax-free vehicles. So the Roth IRA is going to be the most common tax-free vehicle we think of. There's a couple of other ones that we can look into, and I'm sorry, I'm still trying to think of a better way to answer your question, Anna, while still being accurate. So I apologize. Let me get back on track with the Roth accounts and tax-free vehicles. Saving in tax-free vehicles can be really amazing. There are trade-offs for all of these vehicles, right? And taxes are a really big one. When you save in a tax-free vehicle, you put money into that vehicle, it grows over time, and when you take money out of it, you're not going to pay any more taxes on that. In other vehicles, like your IRA, your 401k, your SEP IRA, your simple IRA, what happens is you get to put money into those vehicles and not pay taxes on that contribution. And then it grows over time, which is great. And then in retirement, when you go to take that money out, you have to pay income taxes on all of that money, both what you put in and what grew. Does that sound like a good deal? Well, it is actually, because often we can contribute, we can make a matching contribution from our employer, and that's what we call free money. So there's nothing wrong with those tax-deferred IRAs, but there's a really big advantage to those tax-free vehicles, and that is, it's like giving yourself a raise. When you pull money out of those accounts in retirement, having a tax-free vehicle where you're not paying taxes, it's kind of like giving yourself a raise. You're not having to pay 15% or 20% in income tax to the government. So even if your tax-free vehicle doesn't grow as much, you end up having more money to spend when you're not having to pay taxes on it. Does that make sense? So tax-free vehicles are a wonderful way. Yes, absolutely. Someone absolutely can inherit your IRA. This is a question from Christina in the chat. If you die with all your retirement funds, it actually works kind of like a bank account. You have something called a beneficiary. And so, if you pass away suddenly, well, or not suddenly, I suppose, but if you pass away, you still have money in your retirement accounts. That money goes directly to your beneficiary. There's different tax rules about how that money gets passed on, but the money just doesn't disappear if something happens to you. It always remains your money in the control of your heirs.
I have a question.
Oh, divorce. Yes, that's a different question.
Okay, so what happens if, let's say, the financial system is completely changing? Let's say they change currency. Since lately they are talking about to go digital. What will happen then with all this Roth IRA and everything? Social Security.
Going digital. Do you mean cryptocurrency?
No. A national currency for the USA instead of the dollar.
The national currency of the United States has not been tied to the gold standard for about 70 years. So our money has been digital.
At the moment, but I see there are changes. I see there an executive order that was signed in March by President Biden, 14067. I see that there are changes that are happening around the world. Canada wants to put one in place. I see that the Vatican ordered all the liquid assets, what they have, to send back to the central bank in Vatican. Every organization from the 1st of September, they have 30 days to send back every liquid asset. It looks like they are preparing for some kind of currency change. And sooner or later, it will touch also the US. It's gonna come in.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And
it's gonna come in. Right now, there's a system that is kickstarted. They call it FedNow for digitally paying everything. It started now in September. There are early adopters, and it's gonna start like sharp. It's gonna come in from next year, from May to July. This is what they told in the news. So what happening then? Because right now this road IRA and everything is all nice, sugar and spice, but if the situation is changing, then what the hell will happen?
That's actually something I can say I know nothing about. I'm so sorry, Iveta. I honestly have no information on that, on how it might change things.
So does it mean you're not even saving for the future, Iveta, or are you have a secret way of saving?
That doesn't mean I'm not saving for the future.
Okay.
What I'm worried about, that this whole system change will screw up everything what we are saving for.
That I don't think it makes any sense. I mean, like, it would be complete chaos, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. But the executive order is there, the things are going, I mean.
Again, the finance industry is vast. And
yeah.
You honestly know more about this than I do at this point. I don't know what that executive order is. I don't know what effects it's going to have on our economy. It's a really good thing to keep an eye on. In the meantime,
I think so.
In the meantime, there's other things we can explore to, shore up our finances, to explore new ideas about how to save and how to think about our future. So it sounds like all of these things all of the things I'm saying need to be taken with a grain of salt, because things might change. But
well,
also,
I think they are about to, because holy shit. I mean, they are not wasting time, definitely.
Yeah. The wheels of government always turn slowly. There are very few points in history where things change drastically all at once. And we can see that when we look back through history, right? So the wheels of government turn slowly. I think that might be a saving grace here. There are always unintended consequences, but that's not a reason or an excuse for not taking action when we can. Do I have more time to talk about the last planning things I wanted to, Monica? Or should we wrap
go
it
ahead.
up?
Go ahead. I think everybody's interested.
Okay.
Right? Hands up
Perfect.
if you guys want to continue.
Perfect.
Yes.
So if you refer back to your handout that I handed out as a PDF, if you print it out or just looking at it, there's kind of some three major topics I wanted to go over when we talk about planning for the future. And the one question I always get from people is, how much do I need? How much do I need to save? How much should I be saving? How much will I need in retirement? And I know that all of you will dislike this answer, and the answer is, it depends. And I know all of you don't like this answer, but it's the only answer I can give. I hated that answer. Before I worked in finance, it did this. But the reason this is the only answer you're really going to find online when you talk to people, if you're not sitting down with a professional one-on-one, the reason the answer is, I don't know how much you need, I can't give you a guideline, is because to give you any other answer would be highly unethical. And here is why. When we talk about the factors of how much do I need, how much should I save, how much will I need in retirement, The basic factors we need to consider are, how old are you? How old do you want to be when you retire? Are you a renter or a homeowner? Where will you retire to? How much do you currently have in savings? Do you have a long-term care plan? Because that'll affect your future finances. And do you have debt? So those are just the basic factors that need to be taken into consideration. Further, there's those questions about what are your goals? There's no one answer for how much someone needs because everyone's goals are different. Maybe your goal is to not run out of money before you die. Maybe it's that you want to travel, you want to reduce spending. Maybe you want to leave a legacy for your family or preserve your wealth. There's a question about what's your risk profile? Are you comfortable with risk or do you prefer financial security and safety? And are you, other questions about your goals like, are you downsizing your home? Are you going to change your lifestyle in retirement? Are you planning on preserving all of your savings and just living on the interest? Or are you okay eating into that capital as you get older? So those basic questions about your life situation, and then your goals factor into it as well. And then there's a final category of what are your savings vehicles? Are any of them tax-free? Can you really count on that capital, or do you need to consider tax payments into that? Do those tax vehicles have distribution streams where it will give you a certain amount of money every month or every year? Or do you need to withdraw money and eat into your capital? Other questions about what kinds of savings vehicles you have are you planning on having growth potential in retirement? Or have you changed or will you change your risk profile at some point? So that's about 16, 17 different factors. And so there is absolutely no way that anyone can give you an answer to how much I need without making some huge, very dangerous assumptions for you. I can tell you that there are online tools, online automatic tools that you can use. You can plug in, your income, how much growth you're having, what you'll need in retirement. And those online tools might give you an idea. I have sampled those tools and I can say that their answers all vary drastically as to how much you need. And most of them have some kind of big gaps as far as planning are concerned. So those tools, maybe use several of them if you're really interested in getting that number for yourself. And maybe use several of those tools and take all of them with a grain of salt. So the question of how much do I need, I wanted to address that. I know it's not an answer any of you like, but this is why you can't find a lot of information about that online, because all of us in the finance industry really care about our integrity and we don't want to give anyone bad information. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Second thing, we can come up with some kind of basic savings guidelines, right? It's not hopeless. It's not like there's just no guidelines and you should just do whatever you want. So the basic guidelines you can look at are people should save anywhere from 5% to 30% of their pre-tax income for the future. That's a pretty big variation, right? Think about what 5% of your pre-tax income is and what 30% of your pre-tax income is, right? That's a pretty big range. You can say that you might be more on the 5% range if you're younger, planning on retiring somewhere that will cost less. You can save a little bit less than that big amount if you already have a lot in savings, that sort of thing. You might be more on the 30% end if you are older, aren't planning on moving or downsizing, don't have a lot in savings. Christina's question is relevant. If you get divorced, I can tell you, divorce makes you poor. If you need to get divorced, you should. No good marriage ends in divorce. But there's some of these factors as to, should you be on more the 5% side of that range or maybe more on the 30% side of that range? But that's just kind of a general range of how much to save. Well, what if I think I'm on the 30% end of that range, but there's no possible way for me to save 30%? Then save what you can. Something is better than nothing, and you can always find someone to help you make the most of what you can do. Maybe it's not super important to get an employer match for your 401k, but you might get more bang for your buck if you put your money into a Roth IRA. Maybe you can't afford to save a lot for the future, but if you maybe put some more money and care and time into long-term care planning, you can prevent financial disaster down the road. So something is better than nothing. It does take working with a professional to really drill down into what those specific numbers might be for you. And again, retirement is about options. It's not about, I'm going to stop working when I'm 70, right? That's not what it's about. It's about giving yourself options and giving yourself security and peace of mind. There was another piece of something I could go into about kind of what criteria to pay attention to when choosing an investment, but I kind of feel like we're running out of time, and I want to respect everyone's time here. Are we interested? Are we wanting to stick around? Or are we wanting to get dessert?
Ladies, because we don't see, we see only a couple of you, or just the 3 of us, or 4 of us. So I don't know if you are nodding, if you are.
We can go ahead.
Okay.
All right, let's keep going. All right, the final thing I wanted to talk to you guys about tonight, to all of you ladies tonight, was how do people choose investment vehicles? That's a really good question, right? You hear about the latest, greatest, whatever. You hear about the stock that's going to take off, or the crypto that's going to let you retire early, right? How do people choose what to put their money into? Is it just a crapshoot, a big gamble? Does anyone actually have a scientific method for doing this? And the answer is yes. One thing I wanted to share with you tonight was one method I know about how people choose what to invest in. And it involves 4 different really big factors. So I'm going to go over the 4 factors first, and then talk about a couple of examples to see how that might play out in real life. So when we think about how do we choose what's a good investment, the first consideration is liquidity. Liquidity is how fast can you turn your money into cash. So, a bank, your bank account, your savings account, your checking account, your money market account, that's cash. That is highly liquid because it's literally cash. What about your stock market account? That is fairly liquid. It can take maybe a couple of days for you to take your stock market investments and turn it into cash in your bank account. What about real estate? Is real estate liquid? Real estate is not liquid at all. You have to put it on the market. You have to sell it. There's a certain amount of time and paperwork involved there. So liquidity is one factor in choosing an asset. You want something that's more liquid. The second factor is risk. How risky is something? Has anyone here invested or heard of cryptocurrency? Cryptocurrency is really volatile. It's incredibly risky. The price can go up, it can go down. It has changed a lot over even just the last month. Okay, so cryptocurrency is extremely risky. Stock market investments are somewhat risky. You can lose 100% of your money. There's not a lot of guarantees there. Another type of investment is bonds. If anyone's invested in bonds, there still is some risk. You can lose money in bonds, but those are safer than a lot of investments we hear about. Real estate is a fairly low risk investment, and things like your checking account, your savings account, CDs, money market, and the index accounts we talked about, those are very safe. So first consideration is liquidity. We want something highly liquid. The second consideration is risk. We want something low risk. Third consideration is growth. A lot of people equate risk with growth. I don't know if you've heard that phrase, no risk, no reward. This one I heard a couple of weeks ago. I thought it was really funny. You gotta risk it to get the biscuit. Like, a lot of people think that you have to have risk in order to get reward. We know that's not true. A lot of us think slow and steady wins the race. That's another thing we think of. The whole risk idea, I think, is a little odd, because imagine if you treated any other part of your life that way. You know, you're 17, you bring home the bad boy, and your parents look at you and they say, well, you know, it's a risk, but I think you should take that risk. Like, we don't think about relationships that way. We don't think about buying a home that way. You know, this house is at risk of the foundation collapsing, but you know, you might also get a lot of reward out of it. So at this point, it's worth divorcing that idea that risk is the same as reward. Okay. Cryptocurrency, it can be highly risky, and you can get a moderate to high reward out of it. So risk does not equal reward. Sometimes you can have low risk, high reward. Real estate is often that way. It's a fairly low risk investment with fairly high growth potential, depending on where you live or where you buy your real estate, right? So third consideration here is growth. Always remember to evaluate risk potential and growth potential separately. And our last consideration here is this asset tax advantaged? Most assets are, okay? When you have something like a 401k, or your IRA, your SEP IRA, your simple IRA, all of those vehicles are tax deferred. Yes, you have to pay income tax eventually, but while it's growing, you don't have to pay taxes on that growth. A stock market account is tax advantaged because when you sell your stocks to get money out of that, you pay something called capital gains taxes on that money. And that is often a lot less than income taxes. So those are tax advantaged. Tax-free vehicles, you put money in after tax, but it grows tax deferred and you access it tax-free. What's a vehicle that anyone can think of that doesn't have any tax advantage to it at all? That would be something like a bank account. You put money in, you take money out, you don't get any tax breaks on any of that. So when we choose investments, we have these 4 considerations. We want something, we want liquidity, we want something high liquidity. With risk, we want something low risk. With growth, of course, we want growth potential, and we want to make sure that our asset is tax advantaged. Is there any vehicle on the planet that ticks all 4 of those boxes? Actually, no. You're not going to ever get 100%, but to choose a really good asset, you want something that has at least 3 out of 4 of those good qualities, okay? So let's think about a bank account. It's highly liquid, and it's completely 100% safe, but it has 0 growth potential, and it's not tax advantaged. That only really ticks 2 of our 4 boxes, so we're never going to put money into our bank account as a good asset, as a good investment, okay? Let's look at something like real estate. It's not liquid, so right off the bat, we get a 0 there, right? That's kind of sad, but it's fairly low risk. It has great growth potential usually, and it's tax advantaged to purchase any kind of real estate. So we get 3 out of 4 yeses on that. So yes, in general, real estate is a good asset to invest in. So that is a really nice, very logical way of kind of thinking, of kind of evaluating different factors. It's really hard to compare financial instruments in an apples to apples way. And so this method with these 4 considerations is a way to do that. It's not the only way to evaluate an asset. And again, the details matter and your mileage may vary, but I really like that way of looking at things. That's kind of the last thing I wanted to share. I hope I really haven't gotten off. The intention here was to give you guys more information and give you guys ideas on things you might want to explore. And I really hope I've done that for you. And as well as giving you a direction, you know, someone to talk to, something you could search for on the internet, some way to get more information about the things you're interested in. Again, talking about finances and retirement is a super big topic. So I chose the things that I thought might be most interesting, most useful, and I would love to kind of open it up to questions right now. I'm sorry, Christina, I missed a question of yours earlier. What happens to your IRA if you get divorced? there are so many things that can happen to that. A divorce is about so much more than just retirement accounts, that sometimes you can balance out your IRA and retirement with other assets. It depends on a lot of factors. So there is no one way to deal with your retirement savings if unfortunately you have to go through a divorce. Any questions? Is everyone just kind of absorbing?
She made another question too. She was asking, can someone inherit your IRA?
Yes, I addressed that earlier. If
sorry.
you have retirement funds when you pass away, then that money does not just disappear. It stays within the control of the parameters that you've set. So usually you're going to set a beneficiary in your IRA, and your retirement money will go directly to that person or people. You can have more than one beneficiary on those accounts. Works a lot like a bank account does in that case. Yeah.
So Melissa, thank you very much. It was really, really eye-opening. I think we all know a little part of it, but that's what you hear, and but I think we are missing, at least I am missing, and I just started basically learning a little bit more about financial stuff, because it was just like, for me, it's always done by my husband. But
yeah.
But it would be really good to know, I started an IRA account, but why it is not a Roth IRA, I don't know, because that was my first option, and I was not basically knowledgeable enough to why choose this and why not choose the other one.
So two things are really important about what you just said, Monica. The first one is you do not have to be the smartest person in the room, okay? You do not have to know everything in order to make a decision. There are very few decisions that are going to come back and bite you really hard. The most important thing is to make a decision, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. If you didn't know about a Roth, but you thought, well, I'm not sure that an IRA is my best decision, so I just won't do anything. Like, you can see that your decision to get an IRA is still better.
Yeah, exactly.
So you do not have to be the smartest person in the room. You do not have to know everything in order to take action. One thing I like to say is I don't have to be the smartest person in the room. I just want to hire the smartest person in the room. But at that point, you should know enough that you know how to ask the right questions, that you know you can trust that person. That's what's really important.
Why you were talking about this, I was just thinking about, okay, I invested a couple of years and a bunch of money into the IRA, what I have currently. Why don't I change to Roth IRA and start a Roth IRA from the beginning again, or the index fund? So it's basically, I have many different kind of investment, and some of them could grow, some of them could go down, but they would somehow balance each other.
I love that. So that's called diversification.
Yep.
And diversification, I like to say diversification doesn't just mean you own Apple and Microsoft stock. Diversification means you have a lot of different types of assets. And this really magic thing happens when you have a lot of different types of assets. Each of these kinds of tools, each of these financial tools has different pros and different cons, right? When you have a lot of different kinds, this really magic thing happens where you get to take advantage of all of the pros and you spread out the risk of all of the cons. So you can do that. You actually have a lot of options here, Monica. You can roll your IRA over into an indexed account. You can roll your IRA over into a Roth account. You can roll or you can leave your IRA as it is, and you can just start a new kind of asset. Like, you can do
So what's the advantage or disadvantage doing between these two? Changing one asset into another structure, or start a completely new one?
It depends kind of on how much money you have in that asset and what your future goals are. So one of the implications there is that, let's say you want to take your current IRA and roll it over into a Roth, you would have to pay income taxes on all of that money because you're turning it from a tax deferred vehicle into a tax-free vehicle. Uncle Sam is always going to get his cut. He doesn't double dip, but he always makes sure he gets his share, right? So that's one of the implications. That might be why you might just want to leave your IRA alone and then start a new account differently. If depending on your financial situation, you might want to roll that money over.
Sorry, I have a question. You said the IRA, if it's not Roth, when you at the end you want to take out your money, then you're going to be taxed at the end, right? Like whatever is money left in it. Okay, so if she rolls it over now, whatever money she has in to a Roth IRA now or to the index fund, okay, she does pay the tax now, but in the long run, if she makes money on it, then wouldn't that be the tax still less? Because
Correct.
she just pays it now? Because then she can still collect the money, and that could be more than what she has now in the plane. Is that correct?
Exactly. That's the plus. So that's why you would want to do that, because okay, yeah, you have to pay income taxes now, but overall you're going to pay less over your lifetime. Now, if you can afford to do that, then that really might be a smart option. Some people can't afford to do that because let's say you've got $10,000 in your IRA, right? And you want to roll it over into a Roth. Well, you're going to have to pay income taxes on $10,000. And you think, well, okay, I'll just put $7,000 into my Roth and I'll take $3,000 to pay my taxes. Uncle Sam doesn't let you do that. It's considered that you're taking a withdrawal out of your account. And if you're under a certain age, Uncle Sam charges you a penalty on that money. So you have to roll over your $10,000 and have the cash to pay the taxes. That's why it's just not possible for some people financially. You guys are very detail oriented and I love it. That's not something I would usually explain in a talk like this. But yes, details matter, don't they? So that's going into more detail on why some people, like mathematically, the math works out, you will have more money if you roll the money over. Practically, it might not work for you. Again, you have saved more money than you would have if you chosen not to do an IRA. So you're still ahead of the game. You're not losing anything. You've still gotten that break on tax deferral. You haven't done anything wrong. But now that you
what about if I roll it over or I take it out only after I don't have more income? Then I have less tax.
Correct. So let's say, again, talking numbers, let's say you've got $10,000 in your IRA and you're making $30,000 a year. You would have to pay taxes on $40,000 if you rolled that money over. I'm sorry, tell me if I'm confusing you with numbers.
No, that's so
you
far
would
so
pay
good.
Taxes on $40,000, and you're right. If you just stopped working and you rolled that money over, you'd only pay taxes on $10,000. But you still have to come up with that money cash. You can't take it out of your retirement account to pay the taxes.
Oh, okay. That sucks.
It's just a rule. Uncle Sam rewards you by saying we're going to defer the taxes on it, but he puts a lot of rules into place on those kinds of accounts that he controls.
Any more questions, ladies?
Little detail heavy, but you guys are definitely getting the flow of how it works and how these things kind of interact with each other.
So Melissa, tell me a little bit about what you offer. How your what your business is about.
Yes, in the handout I gave you, the first page is about that retirement model of the three-legged stool and those planning considerations. The second page of that is my name is Melissa Timberman. I own a company called Smart Money Works, and I help people do retirement planning and put these accounts into place that can help them with long-term care planning and creating retirement income that you can't outlive, which is exciting, income that will last your whole life. And the other thing of what I do is I do a lot of financial education like I'm doing here tonight. So on my website, Smart Money Works, I have a bunch of different classes on a whole lot of different financial topics. I cover everything from creating a better money mindset and overcoming some of that programming we have from when we're kids. I cover that, talking about how to budget better in a way that works for you and your family, how to get out of debt if that's a concern. And my biggest class, it's actually my longest class, is about retirement and wealth accumulation. It's called The Sky is the Limit. So that comes with pre-recorded video. It comes with downloadables and worksheets for you to kind of create your own plan. That class is normally $29, but for you guys this evening, until midnight tonight, I've reduced that class to 20%, so it's only $23. So on that handout I gave you, there's a QR code. If you just want to scan that QR code, you can take advantage of that class. You can browse any of my other classes. They're all very affordable. I think it's quite stupid to say, you know, I'm going to teach you how to be wise with money. And by the way, it's going to cost you $800. So I love that my classes are affordable, and those are things that you have lifetime access to. And again, I also do help people analyze their finances, figure out which products and services work for them. I make referrals for those products and services like securities that I don't work with. And I can also help put into place those plans that might work for you and your family.
Super, thank you. I have one more question, because we are all women here. Do women talk about money differently than men?
Absolutely. I think Monica was at the class that I did for Wine, Women, and Wealth, where I talked about the pink tax, which is absolutely about the gender differences between men and women. So men and women talk about money differently, we save for money differently, and we have different financial considerations. Women are more likely to miss out on working years because of families or because we're caregivers, right, of any kind. We're expected to be caregivers more often than men are, for more years. We're expected to be caregivers. We live longer, so we have to plan for a longer retirement. We generally make less money, so we have to save a higher percentage of our income to have the same kind of retirement income. We spend money differently, and we do not spend more than men, by the way. Yes, men and women deal with money very differently. And what I think is the most interesting is women tend to have less debt, and we tend to save a higher percentage of our incomes. So that's
we're savers, right? More savers than spenders, except for those of us that like going shopping.
My favorite migraine and abortive that is over the counter and doesn't require taking a pill. Cellular is called acephaly.
Who is talking, Eva?
Part of our conversation. It might be Eva.
Not anymore.
We do spend money, but we spend money differently than men. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we don't like talking about the money, not in like investment style, right?
A lot of women do. We're simply not used to it in public, and there's this public perception that we don't.
It's public perception that we don't like to talk about it?
That we shouldn't talk about money.
Or that we shouldn't talk about it.
If we talk about money, then, and this kind of applies to men too, but men have there's the public perception that men are more of the providers. But, you know, if there's this perception that women are irresponsible with money or greedy or spenders or whatever, and that's absolutely not true. Women are more often savers than men are. Men spend a lot of money on electronics, apparently. Women spend more money on pets than men. Weird little. Anna, am I a fiduciary? Yes, I am.
What's that?
I know, I had to look at it. I'm like, what is this?
I'm looking at the chat. Are you a fiduciary? A fiduciary says, do you have a responsibility to work in the client's best interests. I mean, obviously, if you're working with someone in the finance industry, you want them to be a fiduciary, but for many, many, many decades, there was a standard that I just had to offer what was suitable to you. And that's not correct anymore. I have to do what's in your best interests. That is what being a fiduciary means. The regulations on fiduciaries have been tightening up since about the 1980s, and now almost everyone who works in the finance industry has to work to a fiduciary standard. These are things like we never even knew to ask, right? Like, why wouldn't someone be working in my best interest? But that wasn't required 40 years ago. Isn't that horrible? I think that's horrible. Well, I didn't grow up in Hungary, so what is the education around everything, finances and all kinds of things?
There is no financial education in Hungary. We don't talk about money. It's like a taboo subject. And honestly, when we moved here, I'm talking about myself, I was shocked. Really, I was, because there was credit card here. At that time, we didn't have credit cards, no checks, nothing. So we always dealt with cash. And
which was really good. I mean, I remember when we had like 50 forints after the end of the month. I mean, for my mother, and that was all. And we all knew where this money was, and we knew that's it. That's it. There is no more, no less. But so in this case, the cash is a really good learning tool.
Yes, cash is king, I learned in this country, which is true, but we only dealt with cash in Hungary.
Yeah, credit cards are still not as widespread, I would say. But to Eva's point, that's not true that we don't have financial education. I mean, it depends on which college you go to. Like, I went to a college for a business degree, and I had very serious financial education classes. So I learned about stocks and bonds and all the stuff that you were talking about. Not necessarily the index account, but I had a lot of finance classes.
Eva, the typical financial education in America is usually you will get one semester of a class on budgeting in high school. That's it. Most of us don't learn a lot anyway. And I mean, come on, when you're 16 years old, do you have any idea what a budget is anyway? Like, you take that class and it's just not, you don't remember it. It's not relevant to you. So even in this country, there's very little actual financial education.
And you don't even, in a teenager, you don't even have the mind developed.
Mindset, right.
The mind, no, it's basically, I have a 17 years old, so I know.
It's all instant gratification all the time.
No, he's very good, but I know how, he already started his retirement, but his not retirement, his fund for after his third paycheck. So I was just like, wow,
nice,
good.
That's great.
To be very honest with you guys, my childhood, we didn't work. My kids started working when they were 10 years old in this country. They delivered newspapers because they really wanted to save money. And I remember as a teacher back in Hungary, I really never heard about bonds and stock market was like, no, we don't want to deal with that. So we actually had to learn all of those things here in the US.
Did we have stock market when we grew up? I don't know.
They do have, probably.
Just so you guys know, the stock market kind of looms large in how we talk about and think about the economy. But people like you and me, individuals investing in the stock market, we only make up about 20% of the money that's in the stock market. 80% of the money that's in the stock market is big businesses investing in other big businesses.
Interesting.
So the stock market is not dependent on us. It looms very large in our conversations, but it really is not a large sliver of the economy. But it's got an outsized perception, right?
That
I
is
think
absolutely true.
it's very interesting, and it's really worth understanding. It really is.
Mhm.
But just kind of so everyone knows, like the stock market is not the only thing that makes up our economy or our financial future or our retirement or any of that.
Yeah.
It's funny to point out that this wasn't part of my education back then. So thank you for your answer, Melissa.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. I'm not. I just, we have this outsized perception of how things work in finance.
Indeed, yes.
I think the big difference is what Ava was trying to say. When I was growing up, that most families were living paycheck by paycheck, and because everybody was working for the government, retirement was like security, because people worked 20, 40 years for the same company. So, you just go to work, you do your job, you get your paycheck, you spend it, next month you get paid again. Like there's a simplicity and security with this. And then when you're retired, you get your pension. So there were no planning. Like in my family's, when I was growing up, there was no financial planning. So maybe by education, Eva, that's what you meant, that yes, when you go to school, you did have opportunity to learn finance if you wanted to, but as families living, we didn't plan for future because, and as I said, when I got married, we don't live in the US currently, but also I learned from my husband, or kids growing up in the US, they do have a different view. And as you said, like they grew up with this, not attitude, but like to learn how to plan. Like as you said, like my son, he lives in Germany and he's 25, and he's also he just finished university, he just started his job, he's already started saving. So yeah, just grew up with different method.
And on the long run, it pays actually up, but you put whatever you have, 5%, 10%, 30%, whatever you have, it's going to end up by the end of your retirement age.
Melissa, did you see the question?
We had that, Ava.
Mm-hmm.
Christine, I'll get to your question in just a moment. We have that, Ava, in this country. It's called a pension plan, where you work for the same company for 10, 20, 30 years, and then they promise to give you a certain amount of retirement for the rest of your life. In America, pension plans started failing. They didn't have enough money to pay out all of their retirees. Pension plans started failing in the 80s, and that's when we saw, as pension plans started to fail, that's when we saw the rise of 401ks.
401ks, yes.
401ks, I mean, there's just an evolution of how money works, right? So 401ks became very popular in the 80s, and now, and after about 20 years in the early 2000s, people started realizing that tax-free vehicles were a really good option. Mm-hmm. So we're seeing an evolution from 401ks, from pensions into 401ks, and then the next generation is now thinking about tax-free money.
Right. Thank you, Melissa. Yes.
Christina, your last question. If you have a 401k maxed out, can you still have an indexed account after tax? Yes. And remember, indexed account is kind of a broad umbrella that refers to how your money grows. And there's a lot of different kinds of indexed accounts under that umbrella. So yes, there are indexed accounts you can have even before your 401k is maxed out. Another thing about maxing out your 401ks, there's a couple of different things that can mean. One thing is general financial advice is to put money into your 401k as much as your employer will match, because that's called free money. And no one says no to free money, right? You generally, if you're doing that, if you're putting in as much as your employer will match, after that, you generally want to look at other financial vehicles because the fees on a 401k can be quite high. It depends on your plan, but I wasn't sure what you meant about maxed out. So there's a maxing out of the general advice is to max out what your employer will match, but there's also another ceiling of maxing out what the IRS will allow you to put into a 401k. So there's two different ceilings there. Again, not something I would usually say, but you guys really like the details, and I love that. I am a detail person. So
Everybody's very involved, right? We like that.
So as an employer, can I ask a question? So as an employer, we can max out at 65,000. And beyond that, you can put it in into tax after tax account.
Yes, your mileage may vary. There are different rules. So a 401k, I thought it was like a $19,000 a year limit on a 401k.
Well, as an employer, you offer a match, and then you can max out on a different level.
Yes. So there's a kind of 401k. I'm sorry. So you're right. The 401k max. There's the employer match up to that level. You can also have a Roth IRA at the same time as you have a 401k. Roth IRAs are subject to contribution and income limits. So if you make too much money, you're not allowed to put money into a 401k at all. Those limits are fairly high, but still. And then a Roth IRA, you're only allowed to put in the equivalent of about $600 a month, which is kind of a low limit. There are other tax-free vehicles like the tax-free indexed account, and those limits are not governed by the IRS at all. So when you talk about limits, there's always going to be an account that matches, again, all of those factors on how much I need. What's the tax situation? What's your family situation? What are your goals? But there'll always be an account that fits your needs.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Melissa, for being here and accepting our invitation to educate our small little group. It was awesome. It was great. I am sure that I definitely will go and check your website out.
Yes, let me put my, I'm sorry, I put my phone number in here, but not my email. So let me put my contact information here again for people who.
I will copy it and put it in the Facebook group where we can.
So a lot of you were asking very specific questions about your situations, and I absolutely did not mean to brush anyone off or be cagey or not answer questions, but some of those are just so very specific that I'm going to need to answer more questions to get to the bottom of things. So I think another thing I'm going to do for you all is questions are free, right? Everyone can ask questions. And so if anyone wants to dive more into those details on their own situation, that last link I put into the chat is a link to my calendar. And feel free to schedule just 30 or 60 minutes with me if you have some of those questions about how does this work? Every situation is so, I could spend 2 or 3 hours with each of you coming up with those details. So
super. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you so much for having me. It's nice talking to you.
Thanks,
Ladies,
Melissa.
if you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Take
Have a
care.
good one.
Ladies, if you want to stay here, then we still keep the most már válthatunk.
Nehéz megérteni angolul ezt a sok pénzügyi terminológiát, igaz? Így nagyon kellett figyelni.
Várjatok.
Nehéz, én